Have you ever been surrounded by men who are laughing at you while they drink expensive, 30-year-old Scotch in a home you purchased, seated on furnishings you chose, and they still think you're the joke? Yes. Last Tuesday night, I was like that. Angela is my name. My age is 36. I've been married to a man named James for the past 8 years. He is the vice president of operations at Reynolds Technologies, or was 24 hours ago. We were having a small party at our house. All 5 of James's closest co-workers are senior executives at Reynolds. Suits, pricey timepieces, and self-centeredness. The kind of guys who believe that bourbon and leather are the sense of success. They were making fun of me. Once more, one of them snorted. Can't even land an entry-level job. Do you recall her attempt to interview at Reynolds? James added as he untied his tie. God, I wish I had witnessed that catastrophe. I said nothing. I frequently do it. Let them believe they are smart, that I'm a soft person, that I am ignorant of. Inside, I was already imagining the email I would send to security, legal, and HR first thing in the morning. Because I am not a wife without a career. My name is Alexandra Chin, Reynolds Technologies founder and chief executive, the business where they are all employed. The business I started before I knew James. And I intended to fire each and every one of them first thing tomorrow morning. I'm sure you're asking why in the world I would wed someone like James. Let me go back in time. I was already successful when I met him, but I kept it to myself. Under a shell organization, I had been developing Reynolds from the ground up over the past 10 years. I went via several holding companies and alias levels. After what had happened to my dad, corporate raiders destroyed his little firm while I was still in college. But that's a story for another time. I wanted to avoid the spotlight. I had discovered by the time I met James that having authority came with parasites. Prior to him, I had dated 3 men who treated my bank account like a meal ticket. So I tried a new thing. I admitted to James that I was having trouble as a consultant. A small apartment was rented. Drove a dull vehicle. Dressed in store-bought suits. He didn't even blink, claimed that he was impressed by how hard I was trying. At first, that seemed adorable. Until we were married, he believed I was renting the house until he moved in. That is, until he began to joke that I need to try applying at the coffee shop down the street. People are not changed by success. It makes them visible. I sat silently with my glass of water that night, as James and his friends joked in our marble-tiled living room, which was furnished with expensive imported furniture. I let the humiliation to pass over me one last time. I have the paperwork already. Monitoring.dmails.gatherings. Reporting on expenses. My internal investigations team had meticulously gathered every shady backroom transaction James believed he had gotten away with. In fact, I had personally installed Peterson, one of the executives. A quiet scumbag who came straight to me. Just another cog in their guys' club. He nodded and grinned as they joked. He would flip the switch tomorrow. I observed our worldwide operations on 3 curved monitors after sneaking into my secret study, which was concealed behind a false panel in the wall, later that evening. I don't get much sleep. More than 2,000 people work for Reynolds Technologies on 5 continents. It's also mine, created by years of planning, self-control, and hiding one's identity. My right hand, Sarah, who is one of the few people who truly knows who I am, received my message. All right? Everything is prepared. Prepared the board. HR is waiting. Security was briefed. Excellent. 5 folders with time-stamped, legally ironclad termination notices imprinted on them were sitting on my desk. All supported by witness accounts, CCTV footage, and recorded audio. For James, 1. For his friends, 4. A reckoning, put in a legalese package. 6:30 a.m. James was still recovering from his hangover when I arrived to Reynolds HQ the following morning. I was wearing a simple navy suit, had my hair pulled back in a low bun, and had applied very little makeup. A nobody. Angela Martinez. Interview candidate is the name on the visitor badge that Sarah gave me. It was deliciously ironic. The standing time for James's team was 9:00 a.m. management gathering. In order to witness the rot firsthand, I arranged for Angela Martinez to interview for a vacant analyst post at the same time. An hour early, I sat in the lobby and watched executives walk by me without a second look. I was holding the annual report for the corporation. Nobody took notice. James passed at 8:45. Didn't identify me. Didn't even glance. Excellent. Thomas, the HR representative, was on time and kind in that phony, businesslike manner. Showed me a small conference room. Insulted my intelligence with a skills assessment. I purposely bungled a couple of the replies. Let him believe that I was overburdened. The panel interview followed. Before I could even speak, 3 middle managers sat across from me and grinned. I knew them all, was aware of their pay, their evaluations every 3 months, knew who had omitted diversity training and who had inflated expense accounts. Without even looking at my resume, one of them remarked, "You've been between jobs for a while. Why do you believe you are eligible for Reynolds?" Another person added, "I acted out the role." Desperate, thankful, and anxious. I could see James walk by from the glass walls. He took a second look, grinned. He took his phone out. The interviewees' phones chimed a minute later. Regarding me, they were texting one another. Even before I saw their arrogant expressions, I knew. The interview concluded with a kind dismissal. "We'll communicate." James was laughing down the hall as I made my way to the elevator. "Was your wife actually there? She's so desperate, dude. Have you noticed that suit? The sale rack at Target?" I continued to walk. Right then, I didn't need retribution. Silence was what I needed, because they were still unaware if they were silent. They were unaware that I was Peterson's employer, or that all of their contracts were signed by me, or that in half an hour, I would enter the boardroom as James's boss rather than his wife. He never saw the boss coming. Have you ever noticed that people only acknowledge power when it is appropriately labeled? Because I was merely James's wife, a joke in cheap heels, 5 minutes prior to entering that boardroom. A forgettable interviewee. I opened the door after that. Not a word, not much fanfare. Simply a silent entry, and the kind of silence that lasts until someone recognizes that they are in danger. As usual, James interrupted a junior executive's budget review in the middle of a sentence. When he noticed me, he abruptly stopped speaking. Initial misunderstanding, then annoyance. "Angela," he angrily said, "this meeting has ended." "You're right where I should be," I replied. Then I let the mask fall. I approached the table's head, my chair. "Take a seat. Be calm," gathered. Not even my coat was removed. I then slid the folder onto the table in front of me. The contracts of James, Mr. Faulkner, Mr. Rowe, and Mr. Evans have been formally terminated, with instant effect. Initially, nobody moved. You know that gap between terror and incredulity? That moment when your gut already knows, but your head wants to laugh? They all took seats in that area. Then James did what he always does, a man like him. He chuckled. "You're not serious," he sneered. "This is adorable. Peterson put you through this?" Peterson, who was seated 2 seats away, remained unflinching. He just reached under the table and put his executive liaison to the CEO ID card on display. The hue faded from James's face. I got up, walked slowly around the table, and gave each man a folder. I remarked, "You have been the subject of an internal review for 9 months. It's all there. Misappropriation of funds, harassment complaints, and fabricated travel expenses." Mr. Faulkner's face flushed. "You don't have the right to do this." I took out my phone, gave it a single tap, and then mirrored my screen onto the projector. It was there. My name. The founder and CEO of Reynolds Technologies is Alexandra Chin. A pin could have dropped. Then, almost as an afterthought, I added, "My legal name is Alexandra. I let you all name me Angela so you would continue to underestimate me." James got to his feet. Now I'm angry, perplexed. This is crazy. You can't simply arrive and... My voice was firm as I said, "I've been showing up, every day. Just not in the manner you had anticipated." He appeared to want to shout but was at a loss for words, as if someone else was ready to intervene and save him. However, nobody did. Not even the junior executive spoke. Security was standing outside the door when I turned to face them. "Please take these gentlemen out with you." HR will follow up with settlement logistics and final notices. Security didn't think twice. They received a briefing. Faulkner objected. Rowe whispered something to himself. James remained still. Until the guard touched his arm, he remained motionless. Then, at last, he turned to face me, glanced closely, and I saw the look of a man who realized he never truly knew the lady he married for the first time in our marriage. He remained silent, simply departed. No final remarks. Don't apologize. The door behind him clicked softly. I spent a lot of time in the boardroom. After they left, not much was spoken. Simply sat with it, pretending for years, playing little for years. Years of having James talk over me at my own dinner table, and of James making decisions for my business without my knowledge. It ought to have been a sense of victory. But really, it was simply a sense of closure. I entered the main office level later that day to see an open area, cozy lighting, plants, and a group of individuals that truly helped shape the business into what it is today. I brought them together in the living room, told them the truth, that they had always been accompanied by the CEO. They had never met. That the founder, who believed in silent power, was responsible for the changes they had witnessed, the new direction, and the tech reinvestments. I thanked them after that. Because they kept the business afloat while the top floor rotted with hubris. I distributed bonuses on that day, actual ones. Not PR nonsense. Not a slide deck and pizza. Bonuses that maintained family stability, supported dreams, and paid off debt. People wept. And that? That was more devastating than any takedown in the boardroom. There was silence when I got home that evening. James has a bag packed, left a hurried, resentful, and scrawled note. You made me feel ashamed. Don't apologize. No introspection. Just one last affirmation of his true identity. I poured a glass of wine for myself and took a seat on the balcony with a view of the city where I used to hide. And I didn't feel invisible for the first time in years. Not because I made anyone vulnerable, but because I ultimately decided to come out of my self-hiding shell. It was 3 days before James called. When the walls shut in, men like him rewrite the story, so I assumed he was licking his wounds someplace downtown, most likely in a hotel bar, attempting to explain to his old college buddy why he walked away from a toxic workplace. Make themselves the victim. He arrived at the residence on the 4th day. Not the rear entrance. Not the code for the garage. No. He pressed the bell in front. I didn't respond. Through the security camera, I saw him standing there with his shoulders erect in yesterday's suit, clutching his phone as if he was debating whether to text or toss it. He eventually gave up and walked away. I gave him time to stew, not with malice, uncertain, since he was still unable to understand. He believed that the result was being fired. He had already lost everything else, but he hadn't realized it yet. I had the locks changed a week later. It was time to draw the line in ink, not because I was terrified of him. He was a coward dressed in tailored clothing. That afternoon, my attorney gave me a call. He simply attempted to obtain an injunction to gain access to the marital assets. It nearly made me chuckle. Does he believe he owns the house? I inquired. He is referring to joint ownership. It was adorable. You see, I gave James the impression that we were equals in every aspect of our lives aside from income when we got married. I informed him that, with family assistance, the house had been purchased in my name. In theory, it is true. The family trust that he had sometimes made fun of during dinner was actually my holding company, but I kept that from him. That 6 levels of corporate structuring covered the deed. That, before I even accepted the engagement, I owned every square inch of that property. I authorized my attorney to move forward. That evening, James texted, "Your argument has been made. Can we have a conversation?" "Yes. Let's have a conversation." I asked him to come over. Only me. No attorneys. Avoid conflict. He entered tense, his jaw clenched and shoulders up. He scanned the living room as if it were going to bite him. "You replaced the locks. You no longer reside here." He made an effort to smile, as if he still had his charm. "You spoke what you wanted to say. Took your power trip. What comes next?" "Now, you move on," I responded gently. He blinked. "Angela, this isn't how marriages end," I declared. "This isn't a marriage. I've been paying for this very costly lie." I didn't bat an eyelid when he tried to argue. Didn't shout. Didn't weep. A folder was simply slid over the table. Your individual account, closed and finalized. My finance staff went over everything with me. With adjustments made for the fraud you committed through business costs, you'll find a clean split. He pulled it open. I noticed the number. It wasn't a little one. It wasn't giving, though. Are you interrupting me? He inquired. I gave a nod. James, you've built your life on lies. You used something you didn't own to gamble. I just took them back. For a minute, he remained silent. Then, this is something you will regret. Nobody will be interested in dating a lady who, does she own a multi-million-dollar tech company and ignore men who treat her disrespectfully? I interrupted him and said, Indeed. True tragedy, he stopped talking after that. Without saying another thing, he departed. For what I hoped would be the final time, I watched his car leave the driveway, not to exact revenge. Not because I wished for his pain. However, I needed that room back, that quiet. When you finally exhale, you realize that you've been holding that breath for years. No celebration was thrown by me. Made no announcements. I just returned to my job, arrived at the workplace, met with groups of people, took the lead. I began to reveal more of myself, not as a shadow CEO hiding behind a mask. Angela, Alexandra. It was finally mine to own, aloud, whichever name I chose. After a board meeting a few weeks later, Peterson drew me aside. You are aware that Faulkner is attempting to launch a new business? I gave a shrug. Give him a chance. He grinned. He leaked his initial pitch deck. Reynolds was described by him as having a toxic culture that stifled leadership. I grinned. Request that legal issue a polite reminder, then release it. I didn't give a damn. Because I was growing our business into Asia Pacific and buying a sustainable firm from Amsterdam, while they were frantically trying to boost their egos. Now, that was what was important. Not how people perceived me. Not what they had lost, even. However, what I had at last entered, a life that didn't need approval from others. I was drinking tea that weekend while standing barefoot on floors James never paid for in the kitchen, which he used to claim was too modern. There was silence. Really silent. Don't lie. Don't act fake. There was no quiet laughter coming from the living room, which indicated that I was being treated as a supporting character. Only me. And that was sufficient for the first time in years. It was not intended for the tale to be made public. I had no intention of revealing my identity to the world. I enjoyed the silence, the privacy, the liberation that results from undervaluation. Applause wasn't necessary for me to feel real because I had established an empire in the shadows. However, the world finds out somehow. A leaked memo was the first step. My name was affixed to an internal purchase report by a junior legal associate who was overly eager and careless. It somehow landed up in the email of a business writer who reportedly doesn't sleep after being forwarded once more. The headline fell like that. The woman behind the curtain, the Reynolds CEO, revealed. My inbox had exploded by midday. Forbes was phoning by 3 p.m. By the end of the day, I got 3 podcast invitations from men who had ignored me at tech summits for years, over 1,200 unread LinkedIn messages, and 87 urgent emails from investors. My second-in-command and main chaos calmer, Sarah, entered my office with her phone in her hand like it was radioactive. Well, she responded, you've become a legend. I gave an eye roll. I enjoyed it more when I was mistaken for the intern. The most peculiar aspect? The public adored it. The tale of the wife who, without her husband's knowledge, sacked him. It spread like wildfire. I was referred to be a genius, a barbarian, an icon that doesn't talk. Someone put my name on a meme that was created from a still from The Godfather. I received direct messages from strangers stating, you gave me courage to leave my toxic job. I wish I had your spine. Someone else wrote, that's also how my hubby speaks to me. I didn't request it. However, I recognized it. Because genuine power doesn't make noise. It's not the press conference ego trip or the boardroom yell. It is silent, tactical, unrepentant. I received an email from a woman named Marla that week, CEO of a Chicago-based mid-tier manufacturing company. For years, She had been discreetly reorganizing her board in an effort to modernize her company while negotiating a highly sexist investor base. She requested a meeting, stated that she was curious about how I had pulled it off. We ate lunch. 3 hours were spent talking. I ended up offering to be her mentor. And that marked the start of something I hadn't anticipated. Women began contacting each other. Not influential people, not branders of girlboss.builders, grinders that are quiet. Ladies who had been surviving in systems that were not made with them in mind. They were not looking for PR advice. They were looking for blueprints. So I gave mine to them. A private accelerator was started by myself. Low-key, only invited. We provided funding to female-led businesses that VCs had long disregarded. Though not scalable by tech bro standards, the ideas were sound. We also did more than just invest. They learned how to structure from the inside out from us. The process of creating their own boards, how they can lawfully protect themselves, how they could, if necessary, conceal in plain sight. 5 of our ventures were acquired in 6 months. 2 spread over the world. My name was never on it. Did not have to. They were aware, and it was sufficient. Meanwhile, James? He attempted a defamation lawsuit against me. The case ended after just 1 week. My attorneys, may God bless them, arrived at court carrying a Bible-sized printed binder, reporting on expenses. Emails, CCTV footage, his past on Reddit. The judge warned about squandering the court's time and dismissed the case. He did not look at her as he walked out of the building. Since then, I have not heard from him. After a year or so, I received an anonymous letter in the mail one evening. I typed, "No address for return. Brief and easy. I didn't think you were capable of it. However, you did. I was mistaken. I apologize. If it was James, I'm not sure, or one of his former companions, or a specter from my early tech days. Not really important, as it was no longer for them. Retaliation was never the point here. Not at all. It was about reclaiming the story, about deciding on the narrative I wanted to live in, and I wasn't performing a part for the first time in my life. It was something I was writing. My name, my decisions, my voice, and everyone who ever rolled their eyes at me while referring to me as darling or sweetheart now had to accept the reality that the woman they disregarded created the future they are currently attempting to live in. Everyone wants to know how it feels, to triumph, to get even, to be seen at last after being invisible for so long. And I'm honest with them. It isn't noisy. It isn't dramatic. It's not a scene from a movie where violins are played, tears are shed, and someone exclaims, "She was the CEO all along?" It is silent. It is consuming coffee at 6 in the morning and understanding that nobody owns you. It's entering a space without requiring confirmation from anyone. It's not moving an inch while standing motionless in a universe that attempted to spin you off your axis. That is how it feels. I quit using fictitious names, ceased using front executives and shell corporations as a cover. I began attending investor meetings as me, not as a blurry screened, anonymous founder using Zoom. In the initial instances, individuals were startled. Some grinned. I was asked, quite seriously, by one guy if I married into the money. I simply grinned. No. I built the money myself after marrying the wrong man. For the remainder of the meeting, he remained silent. Sarah persuaded me to participate in a single-feature interview. Only one. Nothing noteworthy. No arrangement with Netflix. No tale about crying. A conversation with a female business writer who has worked for 20 years to get female founders into print without compromising their integrity. It was a discussion. Sincere. Actual. I told her everything. The loneliness. The second-guessing. The hundreds of times I wanted to shrink so the world wouldn't press me harder, not just the headline stuff. "What am I most proud of?" she said. I didn't even need to consider it. I remarked that I didn't become like them, that I didn't allow resentment to become my identity. I didn't fire the forest, but I did burn the dead timber. It's still the same house where I live. It reminds me of the years I was silent, not because it's magnificent. James, who thought I was applying for receptionist jobs, slept upstairs the evenings I worked in the basement. It was difficult to be silent, but I learned everything from it. I developed my listening skills. how to make plans, how to construct while nobody is applauding. There are fresh sounds coming from that house now. Meetings to brainstorm are held in the living room. Late night phone conversations with global founders. Even laughter, sometimes, true laughter. Not the patronizing type that sometimes drifted in from my dining room. The sort of thing that occurs when women are at last allowed to talk without fear. One of the founders I coached, Caroline, recently closed her Series B. She called me in tears. It wasn't the money, but the fact that her father finally expressed his pride in her. Not for a good marriage, for constructing well. I wasn't prepared for how hard that moment impacted me. For every woman I've assisted in achieving power, the girl who waited in her car for 2 hours after work because she was scared to go home to a man who made fun of her dreams is still in my memory. This is what I made for her, for all the incarnations of her. Do I feel bad about the years I said nothing? No. I made it through them. That's sufficient. Would I approach it differently? Most likely not. Because winning right away doesn't teach you how to lead. Falling, feigning not to bleed, and then creating armor that no one can see is how you learn. When someone asks what I do these days, I just respond. I create businesses. It is unnecessary for me to mention who I dismissed, how many zeros I raised, or how I destroyed everything in order to start over with fireproof hands. That is no longer the story. What follows is the story. When you come out of hiding, when you're done performing, when you finally speak, as you enter your own life via the main door with your name on it. I own this.